Mining diamonds. Alright. Alright. You ready, bro? This is going to be real weird. Alright, so before I start, I just want to mention that at the beginning of this piece, I did stream it on Twitch. I know most people missed that. There is an archive in case any of you actually want to watch it. Something weird was happening with my camera. It's not the best quality, but in case you want to see the beginning, not much progress was actually made on the stream. But I do stream semi-often if you actually do want to follow me. Hopefully I can iron out those issues now. So let's just jump right in. Alright, hello everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day, because this was actually a really great day in terms of drawing for me. I've never really dabbled in stippling at all, but it was pretty dope. So I started the piece about 2 days ago and have kind of just been laying dots down, seeing what it does. It was tiny installments of about 10 minutes up until the last session, which was probably an hour and a half. Just kind of, it was like mostly in that last section just laying down shading and stuff. I went in with a 0.3 and a 0.25 and kind of just filled in all that shading goodness. So I started out by laying down like a foundation of dots, not really planning anything, but instead just allowing the dots to flow per se, even though really I kind of just made shapes, which is kind of what you do when you draw, really. So I started out by testing different shading patterns, because going into stippling, it's a lot different, and I'm not good at shading in general when it comes to drawing. Like, in all of my normal drawings, the only shading I can really do is the formation of a hill, and that's why I draw so many mountains and hills. So it was a real experiment trying to learn how to create that like cascading even fade. I think I eventually got it good enough to the point where it's believable. I could definitely use a bit more work, but it looked good with the 0.5, and then when I came in with the other pens, it started flowing a little bit better. Just like all my other drawings, it was a blob shape. I came in like all my other pieces and allowed myself to experiment and letting the dots set themselves in place. Eventually I would go for a firm pattern, like the dots kind of fell that way. It was a blob shape, like I said, but it was really interesting because I found it kind of weaving in and out with different lines and like tubes, which hasn't really ever happened. It was interesting because at one point I even was shaking my hand to like get the jitter out, because I kept like shaking and it would make my lines really off place. And when I was shaking, I realized I had a pen in my hand and ink splattered all over my face and phone and glasses, and a couple dots even landed on the page, and I tried to just work around them. You can kind of notice them in a couple of areas. There was also a couple of areas where I kind of rubbed my hand against it and it caused a little bit of smearing. That was kind of frustrating, but I ended up just using that part for shading and it made it look decent enough. So I would create like little arches and tunnels in this, and eventually it would lead to bigger shapes. And I went around with the 0.5 creating that outline around the piece. So originally that wasn't actually planned. I was planning on doing a full page spread, but eventually the way the dots formed, it was like just naturally there should be an outline right there. Like everything started fading towards one same area. And that uniformity allowed me to come in and just create a nice looking outline around it, and I thought it gave it a little bit more space to breathe. And I guess when you're stippling, it just kind of takes you where it takes you. It was kind of fun. But for the most part, all of the dots were random. Like, even if I had a plan, I still allowed like where those dots were in that general vicinity to be random. I never really had a place for them, especially when it came to the shading. I just put the 0.25 and 0.3 in, just layering it in random formations and exquisite patterns that I thought helped improve it. I think that's what's so great about stippling, honestly, is the fact that it's so random and unplanned. It's kind of fun to get that in a drawing when you try and plan everything out beforehand with other drawings, it can get a little bit frustrating, and it's just fun to let yourself breathe and just be one with the dots, because eventually I ended up phasing out during some parts where I would just let myself draw dots and not even realize I was drawing. Alright, so as I'm recording this right now, it's quite interesting because I've done, this is one take, except for this segment actually. This is the second take of this last segment right here. But it kind of gives you time to ponder and think about things, because as I'm looking at the screen right here and I'm seeing that only a couple minutes have gone by, you realize that there's just so much time to think over your drawing, but there's not that much to it, honestly. Like, I can explain what everything means and where everything is gone, but in reality it's a drawing and some dots on a page, white and black, just simple colors doing nothing, being themselves in a collective pattern. And I mean, we don't even know. I think black actually is I think black is the collection of all colors and white's the absence of all colors. I guess you could draw something from that, but don't, because that's not what it means. Again, it's just some dots on a page. I mean, I can share with you some of the things that I struggled with, which I know when a lot of people think of stippling, they think like, well, doesn't that hurt your hand? And I only experienced a couple times where it did. The funny thing is, I experienced the most pain from my secondary hand. I was holding down a ruler to steady the page a lot, and that ended up going numb a couple times because I was pressing down harder on that to keep the page down than I was to lightly tap the pen to get those dots down. That was probably the harder part, which is funny. I was kind of indecisive because I thought that it might have looked better if I had used pen, or if I'd used pencil, sorry. I thought the pencil might look a little bit more muted and it might kind of gather together well, but when I started using pen, I used a 0.5 and I realized that it would take less time, but I also realized that you can't get nearly as much depth when you're using a thicker stroke, because then once you lay down enough lines, or once you lay down enough dots, it's just lines. At that point, it's a blob instead of stippling. And the entire point of stippling is to maintain that purity of the dot. But when you use a 0.5, it's kind of hard to do that. You'll notice there's a lot of times where those dots look like lines instead of dots. And that also could just be because I mess up on the dot and may spend a little bit less time and it causes me to lift it up too early. That can kind of drive the mess up of the dot, which is really interesting because stippling demands perfection in a way, but it also demands simplicity. I mean, it's just it's a multitude of dots, but it looks better when you get those dots in their pure form and you don't mix them with anything else. Like, it's the perfect illusion of a drawing, because really it's just negative space filling people's heads, creating this image of something, when in reality all you've done is laid down ink on a paper. And most of the time when I'm stippling, or I know a lot of other people are stippling, it's just this pure like splurge of thoughts. They're not really thinking of creating anything in general, but they're creating as they go. And I think that can be quite relaxing for a lot of people in drawing. Well, I'm not great at talking. So what I'm going to do is go. And if you want to experience the slightly less cringy, more live version of me, I would suggest checking out my Twitch. If you just want to see what I draw, go to my Instagram. I post a lot on stories there. I do a lot of AMAs and stuff. In the meantime, just look at the rest of my piece. It'll be showing on screen, hopefully now, if I got the timing of this recording right. If not, enjoy. Have a good day, y'all. Bye.